EBN's UK studio.
Synthetic hormones are everywhere. They mimic natural hormones. They line our cans of food. They are in cosmetics. They are part of the toxic waste that comes out of incinerators. In fact, everyday household and life products contain what is called endocrine disrupting chemicals. What happens when the synthetic hormone in your body reacts like the natural hormone in your body? Yesterday I spoke to Ralph Ryder, the Edge radio broadcast's toxics issue correspondent in the UK. We have an exclusive preview into the report he is compiling on endocrine disrupting chemicals. The endocrine system is a set of glands, and the hormones they produce guide the development, growth, reproduction and behavior of animals and humans. How do these synthetic endocrine chemicals disrupt our endocrine system, and what are their health effects, Ralph?
Well, the issue of endocrine disruptors is a hot topic at the moment. Up until a couple of years ago, they'd found 50 chemicals, like bisphenol A, which is actually in the lining of cans that we buy our beans and sausages and that type of thing.
Yeah.
And that has now been shown to damage, we'll say, children in hospitals, premature children.
Yeah.
Because that actually leaches from some of the tubes and the blood bags into the child, and that's something that Healthcare Without Harm has been looking into for a number of years, and thankfully the manufacturers of these medical products have now taken this on board, and some of them have been enlightened to see that this is a dangerous way of getting chemicals into newborn children. I mean, the children are born with a bad deck of cards to begin with, and we should be doing all we can for them. But it was in the early 1930s that researchers at the Northwestern University Medical School actually gave a dose of estrogen to pregnant rats.
Right.
And when they had youngsters, they had a few abnormalities stemming from disrupted sexual development, which is defects in the uterus and the vagina and the ovaries in the female rats, and while the males had shortened penises and other genital deformities. These tests showed that adding estrogen upset the normal hormone balance, scramble the chemical messages, and derail sexual development. But it was even earlier than that. This is what I can't understand, Andy. It was in the 1950s that Burlington and Lidman suggested that some synthetic chemicals were hormonally active, and Rachel Carson in Silent Spring in 1962 documented the damage which indiscriminate, we'll say, pesticide use and herbicide was doing into North American wildlife. She warned that something more sinister than straightforward poisoning was occurring among the birds, the actual destruction of the bird's ability to reproduce. Now that enlightened woman was pillared from post to post by the industry, saying she was a scaremonger and she was an alarmist, but she was proven to be right, although they tormented the poor woman for years and years afterwards.
Well, she was vindicated, wasn't she, when they found the problems with PCBs in Japan?
Yeah, but Andy, it's the same old stories.
Yeah.
It's like, why is it always left to the brave few scientists to do the work of the majority? Why is it always these few poor souls who've got to stand up and be counted, while the rest just toddle along with industry and just do little bits here and there, often, as you say, slagging off the people who've produced the good reports, because it's going against industry's interests.
Yeah.
For decades, medicine was dominated by the belief the placenta barrier was a kind of wonderful, impenetrable shield, protecting the fetus from everything except radioactivity, But we're not. We've now begun to realise that, hey, there's lots of chemicals that can go through the placenta and the brain-blood barrier. And some of these, like PCBs, we do know that PCBs affect the thyroid development and the hormones on that. And this actually damages the brain, the way the brain's wired up electrically, you know. And yet, and it wasn't so long ago that the British government was saying, the danger posed by PCBs is insignificant. I found an article on it, and it was a quote from a government minister. I couldn't believe it. Some of the things we've been told over the years, you know.
It's blatantly lied to, aren't we? Really?
Well, of course, yeah, outrageous lies, but it's all down to one word, which is economics.
Yeah.
You know, whatever we say, the likes of you and I can campaign to safeguard our children and future generations, but it all boils down to economics. The world has just gone money mad, you know.
Yeah. So the problems with endocrine chemicals were first noted in the 1950s, yet we're still having these problems today.
Yeah, well, this is industry all the time, isn't it? And you'd be surprised how many epidemiological studies finish with the words in their conclusion that more studies are needed. You know, well, how many studies do we need on these things? You know, we know the only studies we need to do now are to find out how many chemicals there are that are endocrine disruptors. You know, and it's I think there's over 70 that they've classed now as endocrine disruptors. But we're only talking about single chemicals. I mean, we spoke a few weeks ago about synergistic effect.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the readers are all getting, or your listeners are all getting the hang of things now, that you take 5 chemicals, A, B, C, and D, E, and you mix them up and you get different concentrations.
A toxic chemical cocktail.
I do know of a professor who lives locally who actually works on a computer program, and they're actually putting in classes of chemicals and estimating what the damage will be. You know, well, I think it's going to take them something like for 1,000 chemicals. I think for all the concentrations and combinations, it'll take them 100 labs, 180 years. I think so. I don't think we'll see it.
So So let's get some perspective on the prevalence of endocrine disrupting chemicals. Are they in our everyday household compounds such as toiletries, cleaning solutions, etc.?
Yeah, some are in cosmetics, you know, and as I said about bisphenol A, which is used in a host of products, you know, and it's of course, you see, they will say that the amount of bisphenol A in this can is harmless, but then you've got something in your cosmetics, or maybe in your lipstick or something like that. So then you're getting more doses all the time. It's quite like the fluoridation issue, where they say this much in water is okay, but you shower in water, or you bathe in water, you drink water, you make cups of tea with water, all your veggies are washed with water, so nobody knows how much you're actually getting, you know.
Yeah, it
and
just builds up.
And don't forget, children get more than we do. Children consume more than we do, you know, per body weight type thing.
I interviewed Janet Williams a few weeks ago, and she was talking about the problems with phthalates and endocrine disrupting chemicals in cosmetics and toiletries. I understand you've worked with Janet on a few issues.
Oh yeah, Janet's been a member of CATS basically since it was founded, and she was a member of a team I took to Russia in 2002 to talk about persistent organic pollutants in 3 cities in Russia. So I know Janet very well.
Yeah, and I understand that they still use PCBs in Russia.
Oh yeah, we went to a place called Nizhny Novgorod, and the people were lovely there, but the place is a hell on earth as far as I'm concerned, industrial wise. It was an absolute shambles. There's people, I know we talk about the people in India living on landfill sites, you know, but we saw them living on a landfill site there, and it reaches 40 below, and they wrap themselves up in polythene and sleep over the smouldering waste to keep warm during the night. God,
goodness me.
And I was interviewed for national television, but as usual it ended up on the editor's floor when I said, I cannot believe you were the first country to put a man in space, and yet you still have landfill sites like this. So that was the end of that. That was edited.
Yeah. Well, Janet told me when we spoke before the show that she's mentioned something about this landfill site and the people living on it, and as far as she could see in the distance with the bulldozers moving the rubbish around, she thinks they were actually burying the people at the same time. That's the impression she got.
Well, they did say to us that sometimes people disappear, you know, but when you see them, as soon as the wagon comes and tips the rubbish up, the rag pickers, waste pickers, were there straight away. And this is a wall of about 15 foot of rubbish, and they're picking up the good bits as it falls over. So obviously some of them are going to get falls over. So obviously some of them are going to get caught in it. It's.
I understand. Yeah, I understand. She's got some photographs of that. I'm going to try and get them off her and stick them on the Edge website with these people on the landfill.
I used one that was, which actually really upset me. Just as we were leaving, we were in a bus as we drove past still on the landfill site. We drove past two old men sat there in a little square, and they had little boxes to sit on, and they had a drawer, a chest drawer. So basically, that was their home.
Goodness me.
And Janet I said to Janet, "Quick, take a photograph of that." I just used all my film, and that is a lasting memory of my visit to Russia.
Right, that's a shame, that, isn't it? It's a shame for the people as well, and it doesn't bode well for their style of government at this moment in time, and the way they treat their citizens. Anyway, coming back to the endocrine chemicals now. Am I right in thinking that these endocrine chemicals, the synthetic chemicals, are a synthetic hormone which is very similar to the natural hormone our body produces?
Yeah. Now, I would advise the listeners of organisations to contact WWF Canada, because in 1995-96 they produced a video called Hormone Copycats.
Right.
And Theo Colburn is she introduces it, and it gives you a very good basic introduction into hormone copycats, into the chemicals that are causing the problems. Now, I know they do loan these to organisations. I know because they sent me some, and they also sent me some of the more scientific ones, a series of 2 VHS videos. That we actually took to Russia with us. I asked them if I could have a copy, and they kindly sent me a copy. Now, I know you can loan these, and for organisations who are very interested in child health, then I think they should contact them and loan these and show them to their groups.
Well, Dr. Theo Colburn, she wrote the book Our Stolen Future, which warned us about these hormone mimicking chemicals.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, she said that at one side that it was like I'm trying to think of the quote now. She said it's like the first one was one of the chapters in that was on mice, and it's absolutely fascinating. And she said that Frederick von Salm said that the degree of sensitivity of hormones is beyond people's wildest imagination, because as little as 1/10 of a part of a trillion is capable of altering the course of development in the womb. Now, in Britain, we used to talk about a toxic chemical was like a teaspoonful that would kill a child.
Yeah.
Well, what we're talking about here is less than a grain of sand that can cause terrific problems within a developing child with the hormone system. And Theo Colburn described it as, it's like one drop of gin in a trainload of 660 tankers.
Goodness
and
me.
A train with that many cars would be 6 miles long.
Goodness me.
And so, but people can't think of this. That's what Frederick von Salm said. They can't visualize this. You can't. And as I said in that earlier interview a few weeks ago, it was a guy by the name of John Sexton of Thames Water Authority said, they pose no threat, these, because the body produces the same hormones, so adjusts itself. Well, we know it doesn't adjust itself. But these are just some of the misleading statements that we get off industry and its employees. This is the type of thing.
Because when the natural estrogen, for example, is passed out through the urine, and let's say it goes into the water supply as it does to the sewage work, then back to the water supply, this natural estrogen nature can break down, but the synthetic mimicking estrogen nature cannot break down. Is that right?
That's right. Man-made hormones stay in the body for years and years, and switching on and off the enzyme systems. Hormones are released by the brain, thyroid or other glands and carried through the bloodstream to target organs where they initiate a response, The responses direct and regulate critical functions of our body. And these include organ development, behavior, reproduction, metabolism, and regular body processes such as kidney function,
Right.
Body temperature, and calcium regulation. They're all generally controlled by the endocrine system, and that's why anything that disrupts it, is really throwing a hand grenade into the centre of human biology.
Indeed, they are. And the estrogen is a female hormone, which males and females both have. So that is also linked to what I've heard as the feminization of the male species.
Well, I was talking to Vivian Howard not so long ago, and he said that the gap between the testicles and the anus in boys is narrowing. And that is a sign of feminization.
Right, that's Dr. Vivian Howard, Senior Lecturer in Infant and Fetal Pathology at Liverpool University.
Well, he's not at Liverpool University now, he's
Right.
in Northern Ireland.
Right,
He's
he's
moved
based...
to Northern Ireland.
Yeah, but he's still high up in this research.
Yeah. I mean, he's brilliant. I worked with Vivian for a long time, listening to his lectures, and I was often over at Liverpool University with invited speakers, listening to them, and I learned so much because these people, especially the American scientists, are prepared to speak in a language that the layperson can understand.
Yeah.
And Ted Schechter does this, Paul Connick does this, Vivian Howard does this, and there's a number of other scientists that have come over, Anna Soto, Yana Cooper. There's lots of them who can speak in a language that we can sit there and make notes that we can understand at the end of the presentation.
Yeah.
Whereas most British scientists or academia have this contempt for the intelligence of the average man, as if they will never understand this.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard politicians say, "Oh, well, the British could never do that," But I think we surprise a few people. We're not all as stupid as they like to think.
No. Well, let's get something else into perspective here. You don't have to be a medical expert or a scientific expert to actually come out with the facts. People like Dr. Vivian Howard and Dr. Paul Connick are there to help people like yourself and myself to pass over the information so we can pass it on to the Edge listeners and people alike.
Yeah, and there's also Pete Myers, who was co-author of Our Stolen Future. If any of your listeners get a chance to hear him speak, then they should go along. He speaks. He's a wonderful speaker, and his talks are really on the ball. And I've never heard him give a bad presentation yet.
Yeah. You said you were compiling a report, Ralph, on endocrine.
Yeah, and I've been, as we say here, I've been a busy bee for quite a while, Andy.
Right.
And I've over the years I've written many articles, and as you know, all my articles are referenced.
Yeah.
I always put references with everything I write, because people always say, "Well, who are you? You're not a scientist, you're not." But I can read and write. It's surprising.
Absolutely.
The education standard around here is not all that bad,
That's right.
Yeah, I'm doing a report called "The Truth About Incineration," and it's a ToxCat special, and it features articles on endocrine disruptors. Do you want a boy or a girl? This is the chemical impact on developing children.
Right.
What an incinerator emits. Community case studies. This is communities who lived with incinerators. That's like Ellesmere Port and Bonnybridge. Mm-hmm. And then incinerator ash, the case study of the biker. And a lot of this has never been written about before. This is
that's the biker incinerator in the UK.
Yeah, in Newcastle upon Tyne, where they spread the incinerator ash around the allotments.
Oh yeah.
We found out that they grossly underestimated the amount of allotments that were contaminated with this stuff, and there was.
Well, of course, yeah, because the bottom ash, the incinerator ash, is contaminated with the heavy metals and dioxin, isn't it?
Yeah, but they never included children under the age of 10 into the environmental impact assessment, which I find incredible.
Absolutely
and then,
disgusting.
And then I'm finishing off with epidemiological studies around incinerators. This will be summaries of studies that have found ill health, that type of thing.
Right.
I've actually done 2 of these before with Alan Watson from the Public Interest Consultants here in the UK.
Yeah.
And I'm finishing off with summaries of abstracts of useful scientific papers like dioxin produced at incinerator startup, and the heavy metal contamination in ash. That, you know, just abstracts where people can look further if they want to. That's.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of this. It only needs tweaking, as we say. This. It's because I've written this over the last 2 years. And I was going to. I'm still undecided whether to produce it in one report or to produce it in 5 or 6 different shorter reports which people can have. But I'll make my mind up on that over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, I look forward to reading that report.
I'll send you a copy.
Yeah, well, thanks very much indeed, Ralph. But these endocrine chemicals and the chemicals and the pollution from the incineration, I mean, where do we stand now with such as the American EPA, the UK Environment Agency, governments and the scientists within governments? Are they still going down the same road that it's not a problem?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they refuse to accept it. But then you see, you must realise that it's down to economics, this, and basically that these chemicals are impacting everybody around the world now.
Yeah.
Whereas before, increased asthma was just in communities living in heavily industrialised areas, but this is now spread.
Yeah.
And of course, they're all saying, "Oh, it's dust mites and central heating," you know. And I don't know. I know dust mites will aggravate chest. You know, dust mite droppings. I know that these will aggravate asthma, but to me, the obvious thing to look at is chemical impact before birth.
Yeah, well, it is obvious because dust mites have been around since the human beings been around.
That's right, yeah.
And we've got rising cancer rates of 1 in 3. Less and less people are smoking. Less and less people are having these, are decreasing the health impacts on their system, yet the cancer rates and the bad health rates keep rising and rising and rising.
Yeah, well, the thing with asthma is that there's one line of thought that we're too clean now, we're too hygienic, and we're not building up our resistance to these germs, you know. But how does that explain the increase in India, in the slums in India?
Absolutely.
You know? So I suppose that's too logical for a scientist to look at. You know,
I suppose it depends who's paying the scientist, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, it must be, yeah.
Yeah.
So the mechanism by which endocrine disruptors work is very complex, but they share general properties, you know, of 3 ways. One is mimicking the effects of natural hormones.
Right.
One is blocking their reaction, and the other is triggering the hormones in question, altering the national pattern of hormones or altering hormone receptor levels. I find this the whole thing of the World Health Organization and everything, to me, a lot of them are just talking shops.
Yeah.
And they want 100% proof. Well, how in God's name are you going to have 100% proof of any chemical today when there's 100,000 in daily use, you know, and there's new chemicals being discovered all the time? You're just never going to get it. But this is what they've allowed science to get on top of common sense and logic, and I think we look to science too much. And I don't think that ever you and I will never see, and I don't think the child born today will ever see a full list of endocrine disrupting chemicals. No. I really don't. There's no way that they can find them all.
Yeah, and there's an old adage, isn't there? Our biosystems are basically Stone Age biosystems. It hasn't changed since the dawn of our history, and yet we're expecting machine age, chemical age compounds to react with our Stone Age biosystems, and it's not going to work.
Yeah, Dr. Howard showed me a picture once of the development from an embryo to a fetus, and it works on day 56. Sexual differentiation sets in, you know, and if they're upset on that day, you can be hermaphroditic. You know, it's quite horrific when you think of that. But if you look at the full cycle from the embryo to birth and to 14 years beyond, and if you, I hope to be putting this picture into my report, because it explains everything to people.
Yeah. I
mean, why is it that women who took 2 or 3 tablets at a certain stage of their pregnancy had thalidomide children?
Right.
And they only took it within 2 or 3 days. And that was the critical part, you know.
Yeah, so it's when the embryo is developing in the womb, and at that critical point something's developing,
Yeah.
a synthetic compound comes in and blocks or affects that development.
Yeah, and it only needs an insignificant amount, according, as industry would call it. It only needs a trillionth of a trillionth of a gram to do this.
Yeah.
So really, I know we brought in the REACH regulations in the UK, but that's been watered down so much that even sections of the industry are happy with it. So
right.
I think that gives an example of how watered down it is,
Yeah. Okay, Ralph, run out of time, I'm afraid, and thank you very much indeed for coming on to the show again.
Yeah, no problem, Andy.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay.
Give my love to Janet.
I will do. Thank you very much indeed, Ralph.